It was a beautiful prayer that we just heard from Joe Iannone as we got underway, one that brought to mind the reference in Teilhard's Divine Milieu about the discovery of consciousness upon consciousness of the universe, what is beyond us, and yet tied deeply to God's creative power. We begin now with a sense of what has brought us together. And I'm just going to give a few brief words about the CETE Virtual Network, and then we're going to turn over into introductions so that everyone might know everyone else who is gathered here. Let me begin by saying the CETE Virtual Network is intended to do what CETE is all about, to bring people together from their respective contexts, that they might together share their contextual experiences in a way that advances the insight and understanding for all. And so the key aspect for what CETE stands for then is contextually engaged theological education. So CETE, Contextually Engaged Theological Education Foundation of South Florida, is about exactly that. And then CETE has gone on to found a new nonprofit organization, a new organization that's all about being a theological cooperative across South Florida, but is a model for so much beyond South Florida as well. But we must always be based in a particular context. And that means that wherever your context happens to be, whether it's in your own space in South Florida, where I happen to be sitting at the moment, or in some other space, we always bring our context together.
Yeah, and very briefly, Orla is one of the co-founders of the Deeptime Network, so with Jennifer Morgan. So if you Google Deeptime Network, you'll find out a lot more about Orla. But Orla, in the last couple of years, for me, has become a dear friend and colleague, and I can't wait to hear her presentation because she comes out of the Gabriel Moran religious education field, which I identify with very much. And as far as Stephen is new to me. As you saw Orla's background on the invite, you saw Stephen's, an astronomer, a poet, articles he's written, his new book, Becoming the Change. But also he gives spiritual retreats on cosmology at Springbank. And I hear we have a few people here tonight. And so a rare combination of two wonderful people. And with that, I'll turn it over to them.
Well, thanks, everyone. It's a joy to be here and for you to invite Orla and myself. So thanks to Brian and for Joe for inviting us, and for you all as a community for welcoming us here. I already feel such resonance hearing from people in terms of the cosmos and hearing Thomas Berry's name brought about. So I think we're all in the right room here. And what Orla and I hope to do, and I'll let Orla say a few words just as introduction in a minute, is just to show how a bigger context, right, a cosmic context can really enrich theology, but also how theology can enrich a cosmic context, right? How these two fields can pour into each other in a mutually enhancing way, to use Thomas Berry's language. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited about the words that I've heard in the room so far, and Orla and I are looking forward to sharing more about the power of context and the Artemis effect. I'll say what the Artemis effect is in just a few minutes. But Orla, go ahead and say a few words as introduction. You're muted too, Orla. You have to unmute.
Yeah, I'm delighted to be here and to see so many people that are been with the Florida Network. Sharon Joy's brought us all together as Spider Woman, and the people that have worked with Thomas Berry, Elizabeth and Joe and Sister Bernie, co-founding the monastery up there in Vermont, and Jennifer and Marianne and all these new people that we'll be meeting today. It's such a pleasure just to come together and discuss these important concepts for our understanding of faith and what might that mean, because that's really crucial right now. We just saw a film, if any of you can get it, called Bad Faith, and it's really powerful. about Christian nationalism. And so what is a good faith? What are we doing here in this room with our students so that we can bring our communities to healing? So I'm really delighted to be here and welcome, and looking forward to collaborating with all of you in the future about bringing these ideas and healing our communities. Yeah.
Thanks, Orla. I should also
Thank
say
you.
I'm a native Floridian. I grew up in
Yeah.
Miami and the Florida Keys, and so it's happy to kind of be with my people again too. I mean, it's a beautiful, unique place of Florida, and of course, it holds a deep place in my heart. So I'm very much resonant with the landscape and the context of Florida. Hmm. Well, in February of this year, Florida launched a spacecraft, a mission called Artemis 2. How many people followed that mission? I mean, I couldn't turn my eyes away. I followed it minute by minute, as they did this tremendous experiment of taking 4 humans, putting them in a tiny capsule, and sending them on a 10-day mission around the moon. I mean, it wasn't just a technological achievement, but it was a psychological achievement too. I mean, imagine being next to a diverse group of people. You can't get away. You're stuck as a little capsule of humanity, and you're sent the furthest ever that humans were ever sent from the planet. And do you know what happened? They came back bonded in a way that people, rarely get to experience. They also started talking like mystics. I mean, remember their language, right? We love you from the moon. We love you, the whole earth. Words don't describe it. They were in this ineffable space that really is kind of a theological domain. So it really shows that if you send people out, astronauts out, or cosmologists, and you encounter the deep universe, you begin talking like mystics, right? So cosmology, right, in its sacred dimension, naturally leads to theological experiences, or experiences that often fall into the theological domain. So we can already see that there's a connection between cosmology and theology in terms of the experiences that people have. I mean, deep cosmology is really theology, and theology has a context, which is cosmological. And I'll say a little bit more about that. But let me just show an image. Just a minute here, get this going here. And here we go. Taking a moment here. But this image you're going to see when it comes up is astronaut Christina Cook reflecting back on the moon, right, our home planet, as a single luminous globe sitting there in the mystery of space. And it's taking a moment to share for some reason. Yeah.
There.
I love this image, right? And Orla, feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
But what I'm calling the Artemis effect is similar to the overview effect, which is what astronauts have experienced whenever they've left the Earth's atmosphere. They come back changed with a larger appreciation for context. The Artemis effect is a collective, it's a shared experience of awe and wonder at encountering the sacred universe. And so I'm really spreading this term about, can we as a culture start moving in the direction of the Artemis effect towards a shared experience of wonder at the sacred dimension of creation, which naturally comes to astronauts, to cosmologists, to those who are really, pushing the boundaries of the known into the mystery. Now, it also turns out that we're at a time, as Thomas Berry and Brian Swim have said, when our cosmology has led to discoveries about the universe that we don't have words for. Right? The Artemis crew brought back a new word called moonjoy. Right? We didn't know about moonjoy until these astronauts experienced it and then brought that word back into our lexicon. But as Thomas Berry and Brian Swim have said, we're discovering things about the universe that the old story, the old language, doesn't fit. So as they say, it's a time for the mystics, it's a time for the poets, it's a time for those who can create new language to describe what we're discovering about the universe. And I can talk about some of those discoveries later on. But the idea here is that what we're discovering about the universe is really remarkable and doesn't fit the old language. I also want to highlight the context here for Christina's experience. Her experience didn't come out of nowhere because, as Thomas Berry would say, every experience is a universe experience. Every action is a universe action because it was preceded by a chain of cause and effect back to the very beginning of the universe. And so where did Christina's experience of the larger context of the earth in this image came from? Well, it came from her life, right, as an earthling, came from her being born of a human mother, going back through a whole lineage of humanity, back through a whole lineage of life for 4 billion years, back to the very first cells of Earth. Where did that come from? Well, Earth was formed in a nebula from the stars, all the way back from the galaxy, all the way back to the very birth of the universe. So in some sense, in this movement of seeing an interconnected chain of causation, her theological experience, or her experience of wordless wonder, was really there from the very beginning of the birth of the universe, coming forward in a new way. Just to kind of show this to you, here's an image of cosmic history envisioned in a spiral diagram here. This is by the artist Carlos Budassi. And it's a logarithmic spiral. So it's showing a vast stretch of history on one image. But if you see at the very center, here's the flaring forth, the Big Bang, right? The origin of the universe. Out of that comes hydrogen gas, forms stars, stars to galaxies, galaxies forming clusters, eventually leading to the Earth, Earth leading to the atmosphere, all the way up here through the whole pageant of life. And then guess what? We're right here, right? But right here has a whole 13.8 billion year lineage behind it. But this right here is also moving, right? We're the leading edge of the universe unfolding in a particular place, particular time. That's a deep time cosmological context. So it's showing that Christina Cook's theological experience comes out of an evolutionary cosmic process. So theology, cosmology, biology, psychology, all these avenues of wonder and connection with the larger context come out of a cosmological lineage that is 13.8 billion years in the making here. So that's what I'm really trying to connect up here is theology, comes out of cosmology, but cosmology is also implicit in theology as well. Orla, do you want to make any comments here right now?
No, I think we'll continue on, and then maybe we can, talk some more, and then have some breakouts.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. I want to just to make a few more points here.
Yeah.
And then here's an image of a nebula. This is the Pyxis Nebula in Scorpius. And what Thomas Berry said is very appropriate to this image here. He says, we don't live in a cosmos as much as we live in a cosmogenesis. And what he means by that is he's referring to the older form of cosmos, with a big K, the old Greek word for the ordered whole. Most religious traditions and most cultures had a particular cosmos that was their framework for reality. It was static, it was unchanging, it was eternal, and everything and everyone had their place within the cosmos, right? It's like a mandala. It's a sacred pattern of creation. But what Thomas Berry is pointing to is that we've discovered that we live not just in a cosmos, not just in a sacred whole, but in a cosmogenesis, right? A sacred whole that is an ongoing developmental transformational process. So when I say this is a nebula, that's not quite accurate. This is actually a picture of a nebula frozen in time. The nebula itself is a creative, ongoing activity of the universe. And so in the movement from cosmos to cosmogenesis, the universe is not a place. It's not a framework within which things happen. It's an emergent, ongoing, creative, evolutionary process that is fresh and new and pouring forth in every moment. So in cosmogenesis, there wasn't just one genesis as the Big Bang, but it's an ongoing act of creation and creativity. Brian Swimme has a famous quote, which some of you know, but I just love it, where you take hydrogen gas, which most of this image is made up of, you leave it alone for 14 billion years, and it turns into rosebuds, giraffes, and the music of Mozart. So somehow the intelligence, the creativity of creation is distributed everywhere in the nebula. There's no one out there waving a wand saying, okay, nebula, you do this. The nebula is doing it on its own. Now, I'm not taking God out of the equation. I'm just showing that the whole dimension here has its own organizing principle at every point. So you take hydrogen gas, you leave it alone, and look what's happening. It's forming 10,000 stars in this nebula. And these stars are forming new solar systems, which are naturally leaving home, go on to the galaxy to begin new families. And this is just hydrogen gas. I mean, imagine what's happening in our own lives where we have all this creative potential. So if hydrogen gas can lead itself into new forms of unfoldment, what's possible for us in the communities that we serve? So I'm really pointing to this context of cosmogenesis, that we live in an ongoing creative plenum that we call the universe. And that wisdom of that is available to us all the time and everywhere. It's something called omnicentrism, which I can say a little bit more about in the Q&A. But the point here is that when we're talking about the universe, I'm stopping the share right here so we can come back. There's a little bit of a delay. When we talk about the universe, we're talking about a multifold, multidimensional creative experience. And so one avenue of understanding or being in a relationship with the universe won't do it. So Thomas Berry said, we need a fourfold wisdom. We need multiple ways of knowing, multiple ways of being in a relationship with the sacred mystery we call the universe. We can't just say, well, science has discovered the universe and that's what it is. No, indigenous peoples have their own relationship. The feminine has its own relationship, right? The religious traditions of the world, the mystical traditions of the world have their own avenues of discovery. And this is really an Orla's domain. So I'm going to transition over to Orla and have her speak more about that.
Okay, thank you. And can you do the slide sharing, please?
Yeah, back to the slide. Here's that sacred pause we encounter with
yes.
Zoom. Naturally give us a chance to kind of stop and breathe and take in what we've heard as we're waiting for more things to kind of come forth out of the mystery. There we go. There's the nebula.
Just breathe. Okay, next slide. So here we have a lineage who focused on context. And we have Thomas Berry, who some of you have worked with, and of course we're all referring to him and his wisdom, was a Passionist priest and a geologian. He called himself a geologian because he wanted to honor the sacred mystery that was ongoing in everything that we see and before us and coming afterwards. And he wanted to honor the cosmogenetic principle of differentiation, autopoiesis, self-making, and then communion. So the atoms and ourselves are going through this impulse down through this 13.8 billion year mystery. And that's the educative force, educere, to lead forth. The universe is our primary teacher, as Gabriel Moran so wisely said years and years ago. So Thomas was informed by world religions and science and deepened the work of Teilhard. Now Teilhard was a Jesuit, following in the tradition that Ignatius of Loyola founded in the 1500s. Now that was a time of great chaos, and the findings of Copernicus at that time we're shifting the Earth as the center of the cosmos to the sun as the center of the cosmos. So you had that going on. You had the Protestant Reformation going on. You had the printing press, which was spreading all of these ideas, and then you had the empire supported discoveries. So it's not unlike our time in many of those dimensions of expanding our cosmos. So Ignatius was devoted to finding God in all things. And he had a particular style of discernment to reflect on finding God in all things. Now, his style of education, his style of pedagogy was focused on context. For those of you who know the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm, context, experience, reflection, action, and then evaluation. So that experience, reflection, action is actually cosmogenesis within an overall context. However, we've become separated from that context, and we tend to think about context as issue. what are the issues that we're dealing with? Whereas those are really reflections on our experience. And so Pope Francis now, another Jesuit, in Laudato Si, said that we've forgotten that we ourselves are dust of the earth. So he again is going back to that crucial fact of being part of something much, much larger. And he goes on, he gives us a list to remember our origins are in the earth and in the cosmos, remember our interdependence with all creatures, remember the wisdom of indigenous peoples, remember the limits and responsibilities of being human, and recover a sense of wonder, gratitude, and belonging. And he also takes notice of the Earth Charter. He also brings that up. So then, how do we remember? How do we develop and remember that sense of being bounded? And then how do we move towards other ways of being together as the Cenozoic era is ending? We're at a threshold now. And as Thomas Berry would say, we're moving into the Ecozoic era. So what does Thomas say? Go back to context. Okay. Next slide, Steve. So the conversation to remember is the fourfold wisdom conversation. And there are four distinct ways that the universe has come into awareness of itself through human participation. Each wisdom has its own questions, methods, gifts, and blind spots. So with the scientific wisdom, the primary question is, how does the universe work? How does it learn and unfold? So we saw the astronaut, Christina, and she's looking out that window. And here we have the wisdom of science up on the upper left-hand side. And that's that blue-red image at the bottom of the cone. That's all of us at 380,000 years old. That's our sonogram. That's our somatic narrative, the beginning of our somatic narrative. That's our sonogram. So the story of science, shows this unfolding and gives witness to the creative force. So then, so the contribution then is, of course, sacred responsibility, reverence then that the religions focus on. What is sacred and how shall we live? So then we gather together in acts of remembering ourselves when we come into a ritual, an act of remembering, and also a chain of memory. So then women's wisdom, how is life experienced, really somatically embodied, nurtured, and related? And of course, women have been saying that the rape of women and the rape of earth is from that same dualistic cosmology and sense of separation. And what about indigenous wisdom? The primary question, how do we belong within the earth community? So it reminds us that we're not observers, but kin. We're all kin together within a living community. So these four, and not one specifically, is the key to coming up with our way into the Ecozoic era that we're in the threshold of. Okay. Next slide. So here we have one of the very first images from the James Webb telescope, and this one is called Cosmic Cliffs. And when these first came out, I was reading about the CERN lab in Geneva, which is the European Organization of Nuclear Research. And the Indian government has donated a huge a huge sculpture of the Nataraj, the dancing Shiva, which is the creator, the destroyer, and the sustainer. And it really, thinking about cosmogenesis, that same dance underlying and embodied in everything, I decided I would put that on there. And, I used to look at it sometimes. And because that's a vision of cosmogenesis, even Friedrich Capra spoke about it in the Tao of Physics. So what this does then is we talk about symbolic consciousness. How do we convey these ideas? So with this fourfold wisdom conversation, we have symbols then of the cosmic dance, which unifies ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics. So this is how things are being renewed now, that are symbols that were kind of moribund because we were detached from our context are now being renewed and animated. And we have Sister Bernie with us, and she's focusing on art in the Ecozoic era. How do we gather the artists together? Okay, next slide. So then, with this cosmic dance and being on the edge of a cliff, when I was doing my research on the fourfold wisdom, I read a lot of indigenous writers and academics. And this particular quote from Viola Cordova really struck me in a way that few other statements have. And she was one of the first women to get a PhD from the Native American population, and she's Jicarilla Apache. And so she was describing a lesson to kind of show the philosophy that she had inherited culturally. So think about how we are coming to know ourselves now with with this sense of chaos and riding a wave and being on a cliff. So she said, "My father described life as like constantly shifting sand. On that sand, I lay down a barrel, and on that barrel, I place a board. I maintain my balance by maintaining a certain harmony with the motion that I'm reacting to. If violent action surrounds me, I maintain my stance, knowing that the action is only temporary." Next one, Steve. "It is also necessary that I examine my own actions as a possible sort of such action. Have I even unknowingly contributed to the creation of violence? If there is ugliness around me, can I counter that with the creation of beauty?" And so it took me about 40 years as a recovering Cartesian to kind of get a sense of my interiority and being able to do that that sense of interiority, and of course then aligned it after that with cosmogenesis. And so I just find that here we have, we look to indigenous communities and the sense of balance and harmony based in a context. And we're relearning this and we're remembering ourselves. So I just find this moment in time very hopeful, very, very hopeful. And I think we all have the tools now in the room with people who have indigenous backgrounds, with the scientists, with the astronomers, with those in the theological field, and those in women's studies and activism. We are the change. We are the hope for the future. So with that, I'll just close and invite conversation.
How
Here's the
might a
question.
revolutionary cosmic perspective enrich theology? How might a evolutionary cosmic perspective enrich theology at this time? Steve, I'm sorry if just jumping in there. I didn't mean to be rude, but I do want to get people into those groups because we've got conversations. Is that all right, everybody? Let's do this. Everyone will be back exactly at 8:10 or maybe a few seconds sooner. See you then.
So Catherine and Art were in my group, and we shared about the idea of hope, even though we seem to be in the weeds sometimes, mired in materialism and consumerism, looking at our ancestral roots and the wisdom that may be there and bringing that forward so that we can see things from a universal perspective. And I think we all agree that we need to move in that direction. One of us felt like we're already moving in that direction, and then the other ones felt that maybe we're at the threshold, we're looking behind us, which is very consuming of us, and then looking forward into the door of hope. So that's my take on my group, but we have a couple of others who may want to share. Catherine or Art?
Well, we certainly can.
I thought you summarized well. I appreciated our conversation of even just seeing the images of looking back at Earth and looking at it as this unitary and unitary space that in an era in where we experience so much duality and highlighting difference in our culture, to be able to look back at this oneness and be reminded of God as one, and we are one. So I appreciated that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Hobbit. Let's now hear from others. Well, Erica, thanks for volunteering. What do you got to add?
Me?
You.
Oh my gosh, Brian. So we talk about the process of expansion, how the expansion of the cosmos can expand our consciousness and the consciousness of the people, and how it can impact the consciousness of the universe. So how can we understand ourselves as part of this living community? And this evolutionary process can make us more humble, not seeing us in the top of creation, but as part of this living community. And we talk about the theological participation in this process. How can we engage our experience of God in this evolutionary perspective? So I don't know if Sana or Cole would like to share something and add some comments, but it was basically we discuss.
One thing we talked about was how we've been so favored with natural resources and a plentiful planet that it leads us to think, and there's of course people that espouse the theology that this is meant to be just consumed, that we can do anything we want and God's going to take care of it. And I think that's really bad evolutionary theology, or any kind of theology, but that has led to our egos being very bad perspective, faulty perspective.
Thanks for hearing from the two of you. And from who else might we hear from?
Okay, can I speak a little on my group? I'm sure Sharon and Joe may like to. So our discussion was very robust, and somehow the Spirit led us to political theology. And we discussed about the evolution in this moment, how it is affecting the political discourse. And one powerful example from history, the issue of Galileo with the Inquisitor, how the Cardinal Inquisitors failed to look at the telescope so that it will not rack their conscience to accept what Galileo was saying. So, in a modern context, the problem of listening in the political sphere, everybody is locked up within his or her own domain. Can I give a listening ear to you and hear what you are saying, understand what you are saying, even if I'm not going to accept what you are saying, I'm not going to agree with you. Can I give that listening ear to you? Can I hear you? So the evolutionary cosmic perspective this time calls us to, hey, come together, see the world from the divine perspective. It is evolving. Ideas are not static. They are evolutionaries. Things keep on changing. Can we listen to new discoveries and accept them? I think Sharon or Joe can add to that.
Thank you for the summary of our delicious, spacious time to wonder and feel the appreciation and awe and the value of looking deep time, as Joe was saying, the 13.8 billions of years to recognize our speck of opportunity, but we are really powerful. And I wonder, it's almost like a bumper sticker. Will you be open to looking into the telescope? Because the truth is everywhere, but I don't want to look. Like some of my friends who are serious, devout Christians cringe when I say we come from stardust. And they feel sorry for me that I'm so ignorant. They look at me with compassion. So, are you willing to look into the telescope in our political arena? And I can't help but see that Bernadette and Anne are on the same line, and you're both in Vermont there. Who else is in Vermont to carry on this conversation like we do in Florida? Is there anybody else up there on this call? No. So you two are bookends on my
Yeah, she needs to
screen.
come to Vermont though. Come on back, Bern.
So Bernadette, if you could turn off mute and let's hear from you.
Yeah, I'm between Vermont and Pennsylvania. I go back and forth. But hi, Anne. I haven't seen Anne in a couple of years, so this is
Hi,
wonderful.
Bern. Nice to
I
see
know.
you.
I looked and I said, "Is that Anne?" Yeah, so it's wonderful. I
It was great.
don't know. I think Beth Blissman can get on here and Tho. We had our little trinity going together, and I think we can piggyback with what Sharon Joy was just talking about, that you know, the, sometimes I think it doesn't have to be this hard. It's because I like it when it's simple. And Thomas Berry just the way he articulated those three principles of the universe that he would say played themselves out at every level of universe, which is differentiation, interiority, and communion, that if we could just get that one little snippet, if we could understand that the more diversity, the healthier the system. The more that we looked at life through that lens, I think everything could look at it through that lens, because it actually is the Trinity. It's three things in one. It's diversity. Everything's diverse from everything else. Everything has its own interiority, and everything's in communion. So, yeah, I seem to keep it simple, but sometimes simple works, you know. And where's Beth or Tho? Come on, y'all, chime in.
I think, Bern, we need to see your artwork, Mary of the Cosmos. We were showing that to Tho as an example of what it would mean to have theology be enriched by a cosmic perspective. Can you flash it up, Bern?
Oh, I'll flash you.
There we go.
Um,
I love having Mary of the Cosmos hanging in my bedroom to inspire me every morning.
Okay.
She's hanging right here. I can look at her if I look over there.
Is that Angela Manos?
No, that's Bernadette Bostwick's artwork, Sharon Joy.
Congratulations. That's beautiful.
Oh, she's got tons of gorgeous artwork. She's given exhibits up at the monastery. They're wonderful. Little gallery.
Yeah.
Yep.
Remember when I did the gallery in the greenhouse? I was
Yeah.
bringing together the outside and the inside all at once, like let's look at things in a different perspective. And I like to do that.
Well, I'm very conscious we've got about 6 more minutes. I'd love to hear from additional people we've not heard from yet, please.
Mhm.
So in our group, we talked about how the idea of an expanding cosmos invites us into an expanding understanding of God, and how that might, if not break down the walls of the little boxes that we're in, at least maybe make them more permeable. And Loretta shared about, having education in science and in religion, what that did to it deepened her personal faith in theology, which I thought was a great insight.
Thanks very much, Jason. Maybe we could hear from Lisa next.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Brian. I was working with Elizabeth, and we were really concerned about women in theology, and where are we going with this? And so, since she's not into theology, she really, really dug in deep into me. I just received my Master of Divinity, and what I conclude is my ministry is based on Jeremiah 29, where the Bible tells us to marry and have families, because God works in those things and build houses and eat of the fruit of the garden. But then I go back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, where God created man and woman, and he told them to subdue the earth. We are the actual caregivers of the earth, but we've gotten so far away from that. We have a responsibility to make sure that everything has, every animal, every plant, every the oxygen we breathe, every person has what we need. As one person said before, we've gotten so materialistic. But I believe that with the suppression of women before the 70s, and it coming back now, trying to suppress women, I believe there's going to be some great eruption that's getting ready to turn everything that people are thinking on its head. Elizabeth?
All right. Sounds like a big thumbs up there. Let's see if we can maybe hear then from others. Betty, I don't know if we've heard from you yet.
No, not really, but I was so fortunate because I was my group had, Orla was part of my group, and I continued the conversation. I asked more questions for understanding. I came out of that one-on-one in awe and really excited because I got it. I'm like, okay, this is great. And it was the same thing that Lisa mentioned, the idea of science, women, theology, and wrapped up in education. So I'm really happy and excited to hear all about it. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got about 3 more minutes. I'd love to hear from other voices yet, please.
Brian,
Just jump in.
Brian, how about if we ask Orla and Steve if they have any reflections on what they heard in the large group? How's that go? Steve, Orla, any reflections on what you heard, or to bring us to a conclusion here?
One term that I mentioned at the beginning that's really coming to me now is this term omnicentrism. Each of us is an emerging center of creativity for the universe. And so I just love the diversity of creativity in this group, and just honoring the wisdom that's coming through every person's perspective. I mean, we need all of it and more. So I'm just appreciating, this is the universe in action in this group, in this community. And I'm just in awe, I'm in wonder, and I'm just so grateful to be in the midst of this conversation right now.
Yeah. It's really extraordinary, when there's a common context, then, differences are really celebrated. because look at the ingenuity that all of us have in knowing this and can now go forth. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to say something, just didn't have a chance before Brian and we conclude?
I really want to thank you guys for inviting us to this conversation. I like to thank people, although I do believe that we were supposed to be here, all of us, and the energy that is being felt, it comes from such a positive place. So we are doing wonders without knowing it, just by being here. Thank you so much, Joe, for the invitation, and nice to meet all of you.
Brian, how about yourself? You haven't said anything other than telling us what to do.
Well, I would like to hear just a few more voices. It has been a grace to be part of this, and I wonder if Toe has spoken yet, or Avis.
So Bernadette already spoke for me. She already shared. Well, thank you. It's a great honor to be here, and I'm grateful to learn and to explore the universe through your perspective. So thank you.
Thank you, Toe and Avis.
So what comes to mind is a joke.
Good.
A Catholic, a Quaker, and a Unitarian walk into a room and engage in a conversation about the cosmos and theology. Anne and Marianne and I were in a group together, and we had common thoughts and we had differences in thoughts, and it was insightful and a pleasure to share perspectives.
Thanks so much. I'm going to take a risk. I'll invite Paul Ramat to maybe see if he's got anything to share with us, and maybe he or someone else could pray us out this evening, because we're just at that time.
Yeah, in our conversations, other meetings, we raise questions about theology and cosmos, as we know that the context and locus of our theology is really based on this world, on this earth. So God's come to save the human beings in this world, in this earth. The question is, what's happened in our faith with the theology when the science or scientists find another life, other beings in the other cosmos and other planets or other galaxies? That is really changed our theology perspective from this cosmic perspective. So these are questions. What's happened in our faith of theology when the scientists says there's another life in the other outside of this world, this earth, in other planets, in the other galaxies of our cosmos. So it changes our perspective of theology and faith. I think is really God comes only this world or for the other planets to save the other planets or people or beings and planets, something like that. That's the difference.
Thank you very much, Paul. We now would like to invite someone to pray us out. If someone could just volunteer. As soon as we finish with the prayer, we will simply conclude. Thank you all. And who might offer us a closing prayer?
Okay, I'll offer it. Grateful Creator God, Holy Mystery, that we could be here together, sharing our evolutionary perspective, but looking at it as an evolutionary faith. We come from different traditions, each one on a journey. And we're grateful for this opportunity to be together, to share where we are at, so that we live just not out of the perspective of being a human being, but beings as being part of the great cosmic story going back 13.8 billion years ago. Grateful for each one in this group, and for all that Thomas Berry, Brian Swim, Tehad, and Stephen and Orla have brought to us this evening. Keep us always questioning, keep us always on this journey. Amen. Aho.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.